Hi Art Foundations. I'm going to go through the process of creating a drawing using a grid. And this is the image that I'm going to be using for my magazine replica. And in class, I may have demonstrated using another image, but this is the one I'm going to use for this. And you have already probably traced a 4x4 square on a page in your sketchbook and divided it into quarters. And if you remember from the demonstration, what's going to go in each box is going to be representative of this. We're just changing the proportions. And I'll go through that process again if you need that refresher. So some of you have already have picked out your image and you folded your paper in half and then half. This paper that I have is, I think it was like the back cover of a magazine, so it's a little bit stiffer and it's a little bit more difficult to get a crease. So I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but I have divided this up using pencil already into fours. All right, now this process is much easier if you just isolate the box that you are working with. And for this, I'm just going to cover up the boxes that I'm not drawing as opposed to folding it like you probably are doing in class. Okay, so I'm going to start with maybe what I am deeming right now as the easiest one, the lower left. And you don't have to draw a lot of detail because the majority of the detail is going to be created with the color pencil, such as texture and maybe folds in clothing, facial features, etc. All right, so I'm going to start here and I'm going to determine that this shape, so this dark shape that I'm working with, or I could even just draw the negative space. And if you remember, the negative space makes up the positive, so it doesn't really matter what you draw. It's just a different way to kind of think about what we're drawing as we're drawing it. So I'm actually going to start with, okay, this is about maybe, I don't know, maybe about a third of the way in. I guess if I were to divide this up into thirds, maybe it's just under a third. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Position it in the just below a third in this box, and I'm going to draw that contour. Now, by doing that, I'm keeping my proportions correct. Obviously, my drawing is physically a little bit bigger. All right, so I'm going to draw this weird negative shape first. That's where I'm going to start. And I'm following the contour. In class, I probably did this upside down, which is an approach I can take if I want to. Now, where this shape kind of bends to the left, that's a little below half. So there's my art math. It's a little bit below half. Art math. Okay, so here's half here. All right, now I'm going to pencil in this shape right here. Now when I do, this is the red shape that I'm seeing here, there still is a distance of this black area right here. And I don't have enough to match the proportion of that. So I've got to correct myself and use some art math. So that red shape ends about halfway in between the central axis and the left-hand side. And I'm going to make sure that this drawing reflects that. That seems like a stretch, so that might mean that I underestimated this distance. Isn't that interesting? All right, that feels much better. So there's my red shape. Here is this weird shape right here. My central axis of evil. Still kind of doing some redrawing and futzing around here. If you hear some snoozing in the background, that's because Lula Dog is taking a nap and snoring it up. All right, that's all I'm going to draw for now. I can make a decision to do the upper left, and I'm going to go through the same process, make some determinations of, and I can continue on. Like, I know that this this shape right here is going to continue on. And then it's going to bump out. I'm trying to look at the negative space here. Man, she is snoozing it up. All right. And then here is what I know is the edge of the face. But instead of getting caught up in what I think it is, I'm going to draw what it actually is. I'm going to determine where this shape is. I know it's part of the glasses, but I'm going to try not to give it a name. I'm just going to try to see it as a shape. It's about halfway. And it overlaps that. I could draw in what I know as the eye, but I'm going to wait until I start my colored pencils. All right, I'm going to draw through these last two boxes. We'll see how it measures up. All right, so I moved around this whole entire grid. I had to make some adjustments to my proportions. So for instance, do you see where this pink dot is? I think that's an earring. It's actually on, like, half of the earring is a lot lower than I thought it was. So it intersects with this, this middle part of this line right here. So that's why that proportional aspect is so important when we're trying to go for some accuracy right here. I really relied on looking at my negative space for this area right here to get the contour of this bump out of this model's hair. So instead of just drawing, you know, this shape right here, I made sure that this shape was accurate. Samesies down here. Got a lot of weird negative shapes for this area. I had to match up this as well as this and this. So I didn't call it sweatshirt, hair, neck. I just looked at them as a series of shapes. And if you remember, when we start throwing nouns and associating nouns like neck, hair, sweatshirt, that's when our brain wants to draw what we think those items look like. All right. So another adjustment that I had to make was the initial shape that I made right here. That was what I started with. That's what you saw me start with, was a little bit too wide. So when I finished everything, there were some things that were off, and you're going to experience this too. It's part of the process. And as part of the process, I'm leaving my lines very light, very sensitive, so I can go back and erase. All right. And I'm kind of in a position right now where I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to start erasing some of, like, definitely my grid. Oopsies. Definitely erase my grid and any darker lines. I feel like this is a little bit too heavy-handed. So I'm going to create some ghost lines. Ghost lines. Now, just because you drew this down doesn't mean you still don't need to make adjustments in the future. Isn't that the fun part of being an artist, is making those adjustments and solving, and kind of this continual solving of this visual problem. All right, so my next step is to clean up this drawing, give myself some ghost lines, and start analyzing my colors that are in my magazine swatch. I've got a bunch of workspace right here where I can do that. And then I can start applying those things. So stay tuned.